So recently we saw the debut of the 47th and current Sentai, Ohsama Sentai King-Ohger. So at the time of this video, there's been 2 episodes of the show out so far. It's pretty solid. So here today, I'm going to go over each episode that we've had so far here, kind of leading into the weekend of our 3rd episode, which has not yet aired at the time of this video, and kind of just share my thoughts on how I think the show has been going so far with its brand new start. Not really comparing it to Dawn Brothers, but just kind of how do we think a new Sentai is going right now, and kind of just talk all about Ohsama Sentai King-Ohger. So before I begin talking about either one of the episodes, I want to talk about the intro for a second, because we haven't really had it in either one of these episodes, which is kind of a common thing that they do. Whenever a new Toku show starts, we don't necessarily get the intro, especially in the first episode, but sometimes not even in the second one. And the reason why I'm talking about it here now is because this upcoming 3rd weekend's episode is going to actually have the proper intro with the graphics. At least that's what I saw on Twitter, which kind of makes sense. I also wasn't sure if they were going to kind of wait till like the end of this whole arc of kind of slowly introducing each of the King-Ohgers, but it seems like they're not going to do that. However, we can listen to the full TV-sized version of the intro. There will be a link on Twitter that I'm going to be leaving in the description below if you want to check it out. And I like it. It's one that when I first heard it, I was like, okay, that's an intro. And then the more I kind of listened to it, I was like, okay, I'm kind of getting there, because there's this one part that's like down 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 down. That was a terrible rendition of it. It made perfect sense in my head when I was doing that. But that part of the song, I think, is really, really fun and really, really good. So I'm looking forward to actually seeing the visuals that are going to go along with this song. Now, we have had it in both the episodes at the end of the episode, kind of during the mecha battle. We had it like during the first combination of King-Ohger at the end of the first episode. And we had it, I think, around the same time at the end of the second one. I know it played in both episodes. So they've at least played it, but we haven't, seen it as a proper intro yet. But going ahead and starting with episode 1, this one was pretty solid. So in terms of Sentai premieres, they always kind of try to go a little crazy. They got to bring their A game with the pilots because you want to get, interested in the show and have people continue to go watch it. And I think with this one, they did a pretty good job. I've seen a lot of people complain, or not really complain, but talk about how, hey, the CGI in this episode wasn't too terrible. Maybe we're going to actually have some not too terrible CGI for the whole show. Probably not. That's probably not going to be the case. I've seen this numerous times, sort of at the beginning of a Toku show. They'll kind of, I would say, blow their CGI budget. Kamen Rider Saber comes to mind as a perfect example of that. I mean, the first, maybe 2, maybe 3 episodes of that had the whole Wonder World and these fights entirely within it. And it didn't look amazing, but it looked reasonably decent for, a 50-episode, have-to-do-this weekly Tokusatsu Toei show, because that's a very low bar of CGI quality to expect. I mean, think of Dawn Brothers last year with Inu and Kiji Brothers. So, I'm already not expecting, top-tier CGI levels here. But, to be honest, this first episode of King-Ohger wasn't amazingly terrible, honestly. So they use a lot of green screen in this, kind of a very similar thing to, the Volume, which is the special, CGI, or not CGI, but LCD screens that they use for filming of things like The Mandalorian, to kind of have this whole, big backdrop to... It's kind of like green screen to where, you just put, an image back there, but it's, something you can actually see while you're filming. And they don't obviously have the most advanced version of this technology. It still looks like you're standing in not a real place, like the King's throne room, or even some of the fight scenes as well, kind of have that look. But honestly, I can applaud them for doing something like that, because it makes the world feel like it's a different world. This feels like a different world from Dawn Brothers, or a different world from Zenkaiger, or different from the typical, stereotypes of a Sentai, setting, basically, of just a normal Japanese city with buildings and places and locations that we've seen in different tokusatsu shows all the time, or that iconic Toei warehouse. We don't have any of that here. We have something that feels unique and different, and that's pretty cool to see. Even if it doesn't look amazing, you can kind of use your imagination and you can get out of it what they're trying to get out of it. But right from the beginning of the show, they showed kind of in this prophecy of what the show's going to be about, they showed the full 13-piece combination of King-Ohger, which is kind of the big Ultra Zord, for lack of a better word, that we're going to be sort of building towards in the first quarter catalog, with the one Beetle that's coming out later on this month, or you can already get it in that combo set. There's 2 other components to that. I want to say there's a scorpion or something. I don't particularly remember what the listings were for those, but we actually got to see kind of a look at it in this stained glass window silhouette, and then there was an actual picture of it that was released, I think, on the Toei website or the TV Asahi website or something for the show that gives us a better look at it, which I think is kind of interesting that they kind of just jumped to straight showing us that full combination. especially because it won't be the final combination, because we have second quarter toy listings that will obviously show that like 6 Ranger stuff is going to combine with this thing. So kind of an interesting thing there. I'm curious to see how that's going to play into things, because it kind of seems like that's our ultimate goal with King-Ohger's mecha, and we know that it's not going to be. So it's just something that I found rather interesting that they showed us like pretty much in the first like 10 to 15 seconds of the show, this combination that we don't have yet. But what the first episode I think really did a good job at is that while we're still going to have one of these arcs, very similar to like a Kyoryuger introduction arc, or even a Zenkaiger introduction arc, where we're slowly building the team over the course of a couple of different episodes, we still got to see the entire team in the first episode. They just aren't united as a team yet. And because of that, we got to see a small glimpse of everybody's kingdom, which I think is really, really fun. Because obviously, Red's is the primary focus of the first episode, Blue's is the primary focus of the second, and we can see from the episode preview that Yellow's is going to be the primary focus of the third, with probably Black and Purple in the next 2 episodes after that. So I think what was really cool is that we got to see each of these worlds, or these different kingdoms, and we got to see that they're meeting for something. And we'll talk about this more with the second episode stuff, but they did a really good job in these episodes making it feel like it's a larger world between these different kingdoms, between these different, kings and queens of the different nations. That was really, really neat to see. I thought it made sense to introduce them in the way that they did, where they're all coming together for like a meeting. That was really, really cool, and I really liked it a lot because it still allowed us to have all 5 King-Ohgers in the first episode, but it was still very much a Red and kind of slightly Blue focus episode as well, where Yellow, Purple, and Black were there. They just weren't super, super integral because that wasn't their proper introductions yet. Which of course brings us to Red's kingdom, and I'm not even going to pretend to try to pronounce the names of any of these kingdoms, but Red's will be up on the screen right now. In this one, I like the kind of aesthetics of this one. It kind of has like an older Japan kind of feel, while Blue's is going to have this very futuristic, I would say maybe like modern, because it kind of seems like from filming pictures and everything, that it's possible that when we kind of just get our typical Sentai settings of just, normal Japanese cities, that it might be from Blue's country. We might be over there for a decent amount of the show, but that's just kind of speculation. But from what we've seen with this, it created some really, really good environments for the fights later on. Beautiful, beautiful shots at that. I love just like the color. It was the color, honestly. Like it was kind of a more darker color, kind of a reddish brown. And that was kind of an aesthetic throughout the entirety of his kingdom. And I thought that was really, really neat. I think Gira, I believe is his name, is our Red Ranger. His introduction was really nice. I like that, we already introduced him. It's kind of a Geo kind of guy, where he's like, I'm going to be a king, but I'm not going to be a good king. I'm going to be the demon king. So he's so go from Geo if he actually wanted to be Oma Geo. So I think that's kind of funny in a weird way. But of course, the whole thing is that when he sees that the actual king of his kingdom is a big jerk, he's going to eventually have a change of heart and he'll be a good king. Obviously, we know how that's going to go with this show, but it was still a good introduction for him, and I like what they did with that. And the king's lackeys, that's all I'm going to call them, they are terrible. I mean, this dude literally comes to the throne room, he steals the legendary sword and even the king's jacket thing, or I don't know what you would officially call that garment, but he steals that too, just for good measure, honestly. And his lackeys can barely do anything, and it's possible that they were not really trying their hardest. We have a potential, I wouldn't say a leak necessarily, but there was this graphic that showed his last name, which I believe has something to do with the king. And if you know other things for toy listings and everything like that, you know there's going to be a deeper connection between Red and him as well, the king. So I'm not too surprised if it wasn't that he was being lenient on him, but he wasn't necessarily trying his hardest to stop him, if that makes any kind of sense there. But obviously he steals the sword, he's able to actually use it to become Kuwagata-Ohger, and with it he's able to awaken King-Ohger, the actual mecha for the show, which I think is still very interesting that they call the mecha King-Ohger and not necessarily, well, the team will be called that probably eventually, but as of right now they're not, so I think that is a very, very interesting kind of thing that we have going on there. And that initial mecha battle, really good. And I don't know if it's just because we haven't had a lot of practical suits, typical Sentai mecha battles since Zenkaiger, because Dawn Brothers was always a bunch of CGI monstrosities the CGI, honestly, I love Dawn Brothers, I love it a lot, but I really, really did not like the mecha battles in Dawn Brothers. They were always very just bad to look at, in my opinion. But this here, though, really, really awesome. I mean, the whole kind of city that they have going on here, the wall, dioramas, it felt like an Ultraman battle, and that's a good thing. Because, Ultraman's, scaling and what they were able to do with, models is absolutely incredible. And I think King-Ohger, I wouldn't say they had it on a comparable level, necessarily. I think Subaraya still knocks it out of the park when they do Ultraman battles, but this was still really, really impressive. I also got a lot of Attack on Titan vibes from this episode, because you have like these giant monsters that are like smashing down the wall of this kingdom, and it's like this prophecy of them, and it's like, well, just the whole thing with a wall and a kingdom and giants. That's pretty much where the connections go there, but I definitely saw kind of connections there with that. But overall, this was just a really fun premiere. I watched it twice. I think the last time I watched a Sentai premiere more than once was, I want to say, maybe King-Ohger. I remember I watched that one like 3 or 4 times during the week that it first came out, like 7 years ago at this point, which is insane that it's been that long. But it definitely had me hyped for the second episode, and I already like a lot the serialization that we have here, because the first episode ends with all the King's guards surrounding him, and then we head into our second episode, where he is taken by Blue to his kingdom, which I will also not even pretend to try to pronounce, so here's the name of Blue's kingdom. And Blue's is a lot of fun. So Blue's is this super futuristic kingdom. This dude, Yamagast, is the president of this kingdom. He's not necessarily their king, but he pretty much serves that same purpose. He, of course, is our Tonto Ohger. He is our Blue Ranger for the team, and he is fun. I really like him quite a bit. He's kind of that typical Blue Ranger where you can tell he thinks that he's better than Red. He doesn't understand why King-Ohger was not able to be unlocked until this guy came around. He's that kind of Blue Ranger character that's probably going to have a semi-rivalry with Red, but he also is helping Red out by escaping the king who's tracking him down and everything. And that's where the world building continues to just be really, really good in this show, because I like the whole idea that like we're in a completely different kingdom that feels unique and it feels completely different from the one that we saw in the first episode, but then you have like these ships flying by with like the king from Red's kingdom on the screen, and he's like, you better return that fugitive that you got and everything. And it's, I think, just really cool that it's like you can know that these are all in the same world, but they feel so vastly different and distinct. But I think it's really neat that you kind of have this politics going on here, and that definitely seems to be more of the central conflict of the show, because you have the Bug Narc, I think is the name of our typical monsters for the show, and I wouldn't say that they don't feel important, but what's really cool about the show is that the whole premise is that there's this prophecy that they are going to return, and that the King-Ohgers are going to be the ones that have to defeat them. However, and I'm sure this is going to be the point of the show, it's the inter-conflicts between the different kingdoms, especially with Red's king, that is actually going to be kind of the main central conflict, because there's a point in this episode where kind of the main general and, you know, I guess probably the main boss and his general from this Bug Narc army, they show up to make their introductions to Red and Blue, and they're like, hey, we're going to take the Earth's treasures, you have until tonight to give them to us. And then they leave, and they cause a bunch of destruction. And then their whole deal is never like contemplated. Like they never sit there and go, are we going to give them their treasures? We can't give them the treasures. Literally, the episode just plays out with a completely different conflict. And then the end of the episode, it's nighttime, and the generals are there, and they're like, all right, are you here to bring the treasures? And it seems like, not that they forgot that was going to happen, but it seems like that was not even remotely on their mind of like, oh yeah, I guess we got to deal with these guys. They seem kind of just like, you know, a thorn in their side than like the main central conflict. And I think that's actually kind of cool. So I think it's kind of neat that like you have this big threat, and they are probably trying to present themselves as this huge thing to have to deal with. And the King-Ohgers are just kind of like, oh yeah, I guess we gotta go deal with that real quick, you know? But then before we get back to the thing that we're actually trying to do, which I think is just really neat. And if that's kind of the conflict we can keep going on with this show, I'm gonna have a lot of fun with that. But speaking of conflicts, Blue's Nation, they solve things with a hacking battle where they just kind of go there and just type like this, or like on their phones or on their keyboards. That was so much fun. It gave me a lot of like Lockseed battles from Gaim vibes, if you know what I'm talking about with that. It kind of made me think like that kind of thing. And I like it. I think it's really, really fun. I think it fits that country's kind of whole aesthetic and what they've got going on. In fact, we got to see, because of this whole fight and everything, or this fight with the hacking, is that this was more than likely, I'm pretty confident of this, what we got to see some filming pictures of about a month ago, when they requested extras for the episodes. I'm pretty sure the extras were just the people in Blue's country that were just kind of there, also participating in it, or cheering him on at the end of the episode. So my only complaint about the second episode, and it's not really a complaint, is that the first auxiliary mecha is debuted there. I believe it's the pill bug that becomes like the chain array thing, or the ball and chain thing. It kind of just felt a little forced into the episode. It kind of just felt like, oh yeah, we have this thing for some reason, and we got to see some of these extra mecha in the first episode as like vehicles in Red's country. So it seems like in this world, or in all of these worlds, they kind of just exist out there, and maybe King-Ohger will just pretty much be able to pick them up at any random point in time. It's not really seemingly like going to be a big deal whenever King-Ohger gets these extra mechas that are just the really tiny ones that are sold separately, which of course they had to promote the fact that those came out the first weekend with the whole first batch of toys as well, so I totally get it. But that was like one of the complaints where like it didn't take me out of it, but it was just one of those things where a Toku show, in my opinion, is really solid when I don't remember that it's a toy commercial, and in that instance I'm like, oh yeah, they got to sell that to us. So, I get it now. It's one of those things. But honestly, this was really solid. These were both a very solid first 2 episodes. I love the mecha battles so far. The one in the second episode where they're blasting through the city and everything, really, really cool. I like the use of like how Blue's nation is united and Red's is divided, and I'm sure we're going to see similar kind of conflicts to that in the other 3 countries, especially because at the end of the episode, Yellow's mecha comes down and kidnaps both of them, and we know that Yellow is going to be our primary focus of this week's episode. We also see some preview shots that the King is going to potentially have his own King-Ohger caliber there, so that's definitely going to be very interesting if you know about toy listings and everything like that. But I think the show's off to a really, really solid start. I can't wait to see where it goes from here. I think Sentai is honestly in a really good golden era, and while this still feels different like Zenkaiger and Dawn Brothers did, it feels, at least to me, a little bit more back to form, quote unquote. Like, I definitely feel like this is a little bit more like Kira Major and more of a typical Sentai that we would have, at this point, had not had in a number of years, than it is the wackiness and out there-ness of Zenkaiger and Dawn Brothers. And I think that's exactly what this show needed to be. It still feels different, it still feels unique, but it also kind of brings you back to those older Sentai things that we haven't had in a while, so they make them feel fresh and newer, and I'm all here for it. So let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of Ohsama Sentai King-Ohger so far? What did you think of the first 2 episodes? What do you think of the characters? What do you think of the plot? What do you think of the mecha and the toys? Anything about the show down in the comments below, I want to hear about it. And let me know if you're going to continue to watch it for the rest of this year. And I already cannot wait to see these characters interact with like Dawn Brothers next year and stuff like that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So until next time, you guys can follow me on Twitter at LivingRangerKey or at LennyFigPR, and I will see you all later. To wrap up this video, I'd like to thank my $5 and above patrons: Jurassic Samurai, Maggot Alchemist, Robert Browning, Static Thunder, Brendan Overland, Maji Yellow, Redstone MCPC, Comics 1017, James Darty, Monster Rocket, John Luke, Eric Berry, Tyler Brzezinski, Matthew Thorne, Josh Landry, Pyramidas, CPT Tesla, and Cross SCV. You can support Toku Topics for as little as $1 a month on my Patreon, link in the description below.